Order. Julia Lopez to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr Fay. It's a real pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. Now, this debate is about giving a voice to the thousands of small business owners crushed by the weight of tax demands. They are frustrated, they are exhausted, penalised, it seems, for doing everything by the book. They're expected to keep taking personal risks, to employ others, to pour all they've got into building businesses and serving customers, even as the rewards for doing so shrink year after year. Now, these assumptions have bred a troubling complacency in Whitehall, that these businesses will always just be there to tap up. And the crisis now gripping the hair and beauty sector is a stark example of the consequences. High street hairdressing and beauty salons offer jobs and training to thousands of young people. These businesses are disproportionately led or staffed by women, many of whom need flexible hours to balance their caring responsibilities. We all know these people because we've been served by them, even counselled by them, sometimes over many years. But today, salons are under threat. The combination of pressures that they face is now turning into a crisis. And the result won't just be the loss of revenue to the Treasury. It will be felt by the young people without an apprenticeship. It will be a high street where the empty unit they leave behind is certainly...
Can I thank my honourable friend for bringing forward this important debate? Only a few weeks ago, I visited Sue Davis, a hairdresser, a hair saloon in Blaby in my constituency. And she introduced me to the two very young people that my honourable friend has in mind, Tegan and Poppy. Would she agree with me that the government measures that have been brought in not only do damage to the hair salon industry, but in particular run the risk of lowering apprenticeships and leaving it possible that there won't be any future Tegans and Poppy that go into the hairdressing business in the first place?
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention. That's precisely one of the issues that I wish to highlight in today's debate. This avenue of employment is being closed down for too many young people because hiring apprentices has become far too expensive. I'm sure it's the same with other honourable members where they're seeing apprentices being shed across their constituencies because the sheer cost of employing them is making it too difficult for these salons to retain them. That is a terrible loss for those young people and for all of the salons that need those skills and that skills pipeline. As I say, the result of salons closing will not just be a loss of revenue to the Treasury. It's going to be felt by young people without an apprenticeship. It will be a high street where the empty unit that is left behind is filled with a front business, maybe a dodgy nail bar, vape shop or barber that may not be playing by the rules. It will be customers who lose a service they loved, that gave them a sense of place. And it will be an entrepreneur who wonders why on earth they bothered to do the right thing and now questions whether this country is the right place to put their energies. Now, I'll set out the challenges facing these businesses, explain why we should all care, and finally share with the Minister the ask from my local salons so we can keep these vital businesses alive with the benefits that flow to us all. Now, let me start by setting out some of the existing pressures on high street salons. Now, they've weathered some extraordinarily difficult years with the pandemic. Take Wyndham Hair in Hornchurch. It's a business been operating since the late 1970s. Owners John, Paul and Jane returned from COVID burdened with debt due to the stop-start nature of operating restrictions. They restructured, streamlined and now are debt-free. And they're at their most efficient. But the business now offers little more than a wage. Why? Well, that is a major factor. They chose to employ staff rather than rely on self-employed workers. It offers better security for employees and quality control for them. But it comes with a financial penalty. As an employer, they pay VAT on services. Meanwhile, mobile or home-based businesses or salons staffed entirely by self-employed workers often avoid VAT. Those operating outside premises also duck regulatory costs like trade waste, music licensing and more. This creates an unfair playing field. It's a very bizarre situation. You effectively have two businesses which to all intents and purposes look identical, operating under two different tax systems. Hair and beauty is a labour-intensive sector. Around 60% of costs are wages. Now, as I heard from Toby from the Salon Employers Association, salons trade in skill, not goods, and they cannot reclaim VAT on their biggest cost, which is people. This pushes legitimate businesses to the brink and rewards those operating in the grey market. Now, self-employment is a legitimate business choice, but Employment Tribunal case law is demonstrating it's increasingly being used as a means of avoiding tax and avoiding employment laws. Without VAT reform, the British Hair Consortium forecasts a 93% drop in direct employment in the sector by 2030. Now, that's not a typo, that is an emergency. So the long tail of COVID and VAT were existing challenges. Rent and utilities increases have also created pressure. Now, let's add into that mix Labour's disastrous October budget, starting with the withdrawal of business rate relief. During COVID, Conservatives supported high street businesses with grants and rate relief. As of April, it's gone. Coal House Cut in Upminster now faces a rates bill of £2,000. That's up from £0. The Vanilla Room in Hornchurch saw their rate bill rise from £7,500 to over £18,000. These are not minor figures. These are bills that keep people up at night. Now, let's add in the increase in employer national insurance contributions. There's something very pernicious about what the Chancellor has done here. Because of the change to thresholds, the NICS hike is hitting the types of businesses that employ a large number of lower-paid or part-time workers. For Utopia Beauty Salon in Hornchurch, that means a rise in employer NICS from £750 to £1,000 a worker, many of whom are single mums providing for their families. They've already had to let go one of their tight-knit team. And because Utopia suppliers are facing exactly the same pressures, they're seeing cost increases of 5%, and energy and utility bills have also trebled. I'm seeing now an unmistakable theme in my constituency work, where female business owners with many female employees are approaching me for the first time. Now, I've been an MP nearly 8 years. Let me tell you, these are the types of people who never get in touch with their MP. To put some numbers on it, in hair and beauty, over 80% of the workforce are women. 86% of businesses are female-owned. 40% of the workforce works part-time, compared to 25% in the wider economy. Almost 1 in 3 are under 30, so it's a young workforce. And 45% of the sector's jobs are in areas with the highest levels of unemployment. So I want to say something that really doesn't come easily to me, because I utterly loathe identity politics. But it is hard to ignore the impact, let alone the irony, of a Chancellor celebrating herself for being the first woman to hold that office while simultaneously hammering the sectors that employ, serve and are often led by women.
Will my honourable friend get by?
Certainly.
I'd like to thank my honourable friend for bringing this debate forward today. It's incredibly important, and just up the road from her in Essex, in Basildon and Billericay, the well-groomed men and women are facing exactly the same issues. And I thought it was particularly a poignant moment to come in on her, because it is exactly these part-time workers, many women, who are being affected, often in female-run businesses as well. And does she agree with me that the combination of all these different things coming together, the increase in national insurance, the issues around the business rates relief on the high streets, these are really hitting. But also there is this real concern as well around some of the legislation coming forwards in the so-called employment bill, which local businesses are telling me is an unemployment bill, which is actually driving people, rather than actually protecting workers, is actually causing more problems because people just don't want people on their payrolls.
He's absolutely right. It is about the series of things that are hitting these businesses. It's about new legislation, it's about new taxes, it's about the withdrawal of reliefs that have been supporting them. And I'm very glad that he intervened, because I was in Hornchurch yesterday speaking to Wyndham Hare. The gentleman, John Paul, who runs that business, is one of his constituents, and he's been telling me how supportive he has been of his local high street. So I appreciate the support he's giving me today in this debate. Now, as he says, it's a whole range of people sectors. So it's not just about salons being hit with these staggering tax bills. It's also about the early years sector. Now, this is a sector which supports many of those other businesses which require good workers. And when I talk to Havering nurseries in my constituency, some of the bills that they're talking about are just simply unbelievable. So unbelievable to the extent that actually when I tell people about them, they actually don't believe them. They think that there's something, they must have got their sums wrong. That's absolutely not true. So let me tell you about one of my after-school and holiday clubs providers. She's seen her annual NICS bill going from £10,851 to £26,040. This is a small business, and it is absolutely hammering them. One nursery provider has told me that the combined impact of NICS and minimum wage is adding £30,000 to her payroll costs every month. These are unbelievable numbers that risk driving many nurseries to closure, and that will dismantle the support network that allows many other women to go into the workplace. Finally, now minimum wage is right in principle, but when you force a small salon with razor-thin margins to meet that extra cost on top of everything else, it becomes untenable. And add that to the looming employment rights bill, and many salons are telling staff to go self-employed just to survive. And that's not giving people more protections, it's ripping up the ones that they have already. Which brings me to apprentices. Now, salons are letting them go very fast. For decades, this industry has opened doors for young people to learn skills and earn a living, and that ladder is being kicked away. At Coal House Cuts, the owners once proudly trained apprentices. Now they cannot afford to. Wyndham used to employ 4 apprentices, now they've got 1. The Vanilla Room is getting daily calls from laid-off apprentices, but they too have had to cut learner hours. Owner Kerry told me for the first time in 30 years we just cannot afford to run apprenticeships. Our costs are up £28,000 on apprenticeships a year. How much does the government think salons make? After I tabled this debate, more stories poured in from across the country. Now, this crisis goes beyond hair and beauty, because I'm hearing the same from construction firms, another traditional route for working-class youth. 2 vital pathways into work for working-class girls and boys are collapsing. Is this the future that Labour promised? A generation of young people priced out of skilled trades because Westminster couldn't design a budget with small businesses in mind. This is surely the very opposite of what this government says it wants, and it is utterly incompatible with its drive to get people off welfare. And since beauty salons are facing so many different costs, they're cutting back on training in a sector whose customers demand they are up on the latest technologies. So what's going to happen? Well, first there will be job losses and price hikes. One of the challenges for many salons is that their customers are facing the same economic headwinds, so they're spending less and visiting less often. And then there's the ultimate risk of closures. And every time a salon closes, it leaves more than just an empty unit. It leaves a void in the community, a place of connection, conversation, confidence, gone. Speaking to Wyndham Hair yesterday, I heard not just about the services they offer, but the support they gave their long-standing clients through COVID. This is the kind of businesses that these people run. Utopia has clients aged from 10 to 97. The 97-year-old goes to the beauty salon because it's her place of sanctuary. Then legitimate businesses vanish, replaced by shady operations, often fronts for illegal or exploitative practices. The rest of the high street struggles, apprenticeship routes collapse, and tax receipts will fall. They won't be rising.
Will she allow me?
Certainly.
I know it's not the main thrust of her argument, but does she share my concern at the very detailed exposés at the end of March, both by the Evening Standard and the Sunday Times, about the huge proliferation of barber shops in particular that could not possibly be conducting a legitimate trade? And they're talking in the Evening Standard, for example, about 17 barbers in and around a 2-mile stretch of Streatham High Road, and on a similarly sized section of Kingsland Road between Stoke Newington and Haggerston, there are around 25. This is clearly criminal activity on a major scale.
I thank him for that important intervention. As I was preparing for this debate, I was reading about some of the police operations in Manchester where they've been cracking down on this kind of activity, and the frequency with which they were finding that they were front operations for illegal businesses, often with links to international crime gangs, was deeply worrying. And this is one of the reasons I want to try and raise the profile of this issue. We cannot lose legitimate businesses from our high streets, because what fills the void is not something that none of us wants in our communities. So what can be done? Now, I know how this works. The Minister sits in DBT, not HMT, so he won't be able to give any substantive answers to the fundamental mistakes that are being made on tax policy. But like any business minister worth his salt, he will probably share my concerns and be wondering how best to get the Treasury to change course. He might even see this debate as quite helpful to his own lobbying, just like the Education Minister and his officials did when I gave him evidence about the crisis now engulfing early years. So here are some practical asks that my salons would like him to make of the Chancellor. VAT reform, a reduced rate of VAT for labour-intensive services, restoration of business rates relief and the overhaul of the outdated business rate system, particularly for high street premises, the revival of apprenticeship incentives, revisiting the measures in the October budget. Look, use the global market turmoil as an excuse if you need to mask Labour's mistakes, if that's what it's going to take. But let's get a U-turn on these economy-shrinking tax takes. They are not working. Confidence and employment are down. Growth projections have been halved. The tax take is going to be shrinking, and that's going to translate into a smaller pot for public services. You don't need to take my word for it. The IMF said so just yesterday, confirming their view that the UK growth prospects have been cut because of domestic factors. So to conclude, this debate has to serve as a reminder that government does not create growth. Businesses do. People do. And these businesses are now often paying increases in rent, utility bills, professional fees, VAT, COVID debt interest, and since April, giant hikes in business rates and the cost of employing people. It is just too much. People work to their incentives, and right now, the incentive to start a business like a hair and beauty salon, grow it, take on staff with full employment rights, and train apprentices is simply not there. Now, the government says it cares about growth and communities and employee rights, but its actions, I hope by accident rather than design, are crippling the very people who grow things, give heart to communities and employ people. So I say to the Minister, use this debate, take these real stories, these stark warnings and this sector's clear-eyed solutions straight to the Treasury before it's too late.
I remind members they should bob if they do wish to speak in this debate. It seems there's quite a few members who wish to speak. We'll be coming to the front bench at 5:10. So although I won't set a deadline, a hard deadline, speeches should be about 3 minutes. The question is that this House has considered the impact of government policy on the hair and beauty sectors. Mayor Ellis.
Your chairship, Mrs McVeigh, and I'd also like to thank my honourable friend for Hornchurch and Upminster for securing this really important debate on a sector that, as she rightly says, is often overlooked but is such a critical part for many of our communities, including mine in Ribble Valley in Lancashire. As my colleagues I'm sure will reference as well, the hair and beauty sector is a thriving economic powerhouse, contributing huge amounts to the UK economy alongside increasing visitors to high streets and promoting community well-being. Due to its impact on not only the economy but also our physical wellness, we must ensure that the whole sector is regulated effectively, and in my contribution I'd like to highlight the concerns myself and a number of my Ribble Valley residents I've spoken to have on the regulation of the beauty sector in particular. Firstly, it's deeply concerning that often aesthetic medicine, a recognised medical speciality by the Royal Society of Medicine, is considered just another part of the hair and beauty sector. If this were cardiology or dermatology, there would rightly be huge concern at non-medical professionals performing high-risk procedures. Aesthetic treatments are not cosmetic extras. They can be invasive medical procedures with serious risks including blindness, tissue necrosis and death. I've recently read several tragic news stories of individuals such as Alice Webb, a mother of 5, who have died after undergoing non-surgical treatments, including the increasingly unpopular Brazilian butt lift, known as BBL procedures. No charges have been brought because it is still not illegal. However, it has been promising to hear that last December, Save Face, a government-approved register of trusted practitioners, met with the government to share Alice's story and discuss potential solutions to stop untrained individuals performing such procedures. One of my constituents, Dr Natalie Howarth, has shared that as a medical professional with her own aesthetic clinic, The Doctor and Company, she has to routinely manage complications previously caused by poorly trained practitioners. Legitimate medically trained professionals, such as Dr Natalie, undergo training built on years of foundational medical education, ethical standards and regulatory oversight. A 3 to 7 day course cannot replicate this. The increase in unreputable training providers across social media is increasingly worrying. We must look into training standards to rectify this. Across the UK, invasive procedures like fillers, liposuction and facelifts are being performed in unregulated salons. These are overwhelmingly carried out on women, reflecting a systemic failure to take the risk seriously, often dismissed as a women's issue or vanity. In a society where our beauty standards are shaped by social media and celebrity culture, it's no doubt that the rise for aesthetics treatments will continue to grow. In 2024 alone, the UK aesthetics industry grew by a considerable 8.4%. Unregulated actors in this space lower the reputation of the whole industry, which in turn impacts the success of safe and legitimate services like those provided by my constituent Natalie. Therefore, we must work to tackle the rise of unregulated cosmetic procedures, and I would be grateful if the Minister could confirm whether the Government plans to follow up on the previous Government's consultation on non-surgical cosmetic procedures. The Government must listen to women's stories and work to act and legislate aesthetic medicine to ensure people's safety is secured. Meanwhile, the NHS shoulders the burden. A&E departments are seeing increasing complications from fillers, Botox and laser treatments that should have been managed within a clinical setting. The industry must not be overlooked. We need to support trained practitioners and advocate for women seeking treatments by prioritising the raising of standards across this dynamic sector. Thank you.
Lee Thomas.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, Ms McVeigh. I'd like to thank my honourable friend for calling this debate. It's a very important one and one that I've had much communication from constituents on, particularly those who operate their own health and beauty businesses in my constituency. These businesses that we're all aware of, they're a cornerstone of our high street and our community. They provide valuable employment. And I was particularly struck by the comments by my right honourable friend around the volume of employment that they provide, in particular to female members of society. But the crisis that we face is an urgent one. The stakes are high, and the voices of salon owners, staff and apprentices must be heard. I'd particularly like to highlight an example from my constituent who got in touch, operating a salon in Bromsgrove, and after 33 years of contributing to the local economy, creating jobs and nurturing talent, they face the heart-wrenching possibility of having to close their doors within the next 12 to 18 months. Severe financial pressures exacerbated by government policies have pushed them to the brink. And without support, staff, including a promising new apprentice, may lose their livelihoods. One of the major challenges is the disparity caused by disguised employment practices. VAT-registered salons, like this owner's one, are struggling to compete with establishments that are exploiting loopholes, where workers are falsely registering as self-employed to dodge VAT. This creates an unfair playing field, forcing ethical businesses to consider unsustainable practices simply to stay afloat. But the consequences of inaction extend far beyond individual salons. Industry forecasts paint a bleak picture: a 93% drop in employment by 2030, no new apprentices by 2027, and the loss of generations of talent. Rising costs, including in this case a wage bill of £52,000 before factoring in rent, national insurance and pensions, make it impossible for compliant salons to thrive under the current VAT threshold of £90,000. This is why support from the government is not optional, it is essential. Now, this salon owner, alongside many others, have taken proactive steps to bring attention to this crisis. They're a member of the British Hair Consortium. They've contributed to comprehensive dialogue with government, urging action that cannot wait. And I'm also struck by the comment made by the honourable member who just spoke on non-surgical aesthetic treatment. I've raised this before in the House of Commons myself. I too have got a constituent called Nikki Robinson, who is quite happy to go on the public record that she often performs corrective action for surgery that has gone wrong. This is another dimension to this industry that actually presents an emerging healthcare crisis that I too urge government to address. And I too would like the Minister to confirm to this House when the government will introduce a mandatory licensing regime that will protect not just consumers but also those who are practising in this industry. The beauty sector is not merely about aesthetics, it is about empowering individuals, it is about building confidence and fostering community connections that we all know exist across our constituencies. It is time for the government to recognise the importance of this industry and take the necessary steps to ensure its survival.
Kat Eccles.
To once again serve under your chairship, and I thank the honourable member for Hornchurch and Upminster for bringing this important debate today. I was recently contacted by the owner of a local international award-winning hair salon in my constituency. Tim Scott-Wright runs a salon in the village of Wollaston and prides himself on training the next generation of hairstylists. But sadly, Tim does not think he'll be able to take on any apprentices this year due to the increased NICS contributions and increase to national minimum wage. Now, it is important to say that Tim and others are more than happy to contribute a bit more to get Britain's economy growing. However, he did not realise it would impact his business so drastically. Tim told me about salons forced into the self-employed model to reduce costs, which can have the unintended impact of forcing workers into accidental tax avoidance. But this also reduces training opportunities for the next generation. Salons are already operating on slim profit margins, and the current VAT rate places an unsustainable burden on these labour-intensive businesses. Unlike other sectors that benefit from lower VAT rates or exemptions, hair salons must pass these costs on to customers, making services less affordable and reducing demand. A proposed reduction in VAT to 10% would provide immediate relief, allowing businesses to plan for the future and keep contributing towards our economy. I have already written to the Treasury and Department of Business and Trade to urge the government to consider a targeted reduction in VAT for hair salons, bringing it down from 20% to 10%. And many salons are facing severe financial difficulties due to a combination of rising operational costs, reduced consumer spending and the long-term impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. The hair and beauty industry are a vital contributor to the UK economy, supporting over 250,000 jobs and generating billions in annual revenue. So let's back our hair and beauty industry, make sure revenue is not lost in self-employed models and keep the sector thriving.
Dame Caroline Dinich.
Very a pleasure to serve with you in the chair, and I'd like to start by congratulating my honourable friend from Hornchurch and Upminster for securing this debate, but also articulating the issues that the hair and beauty sector face so comprehensively. I completely share her concern and her frustration and that of the sector. Hair and beauty industry contributes £5.8 billion to the UK economy. It's not just how people look. This is really, really important for our high streets. It's important for individuals. It's important for our communities. And yet the government seems to insist on seeing this very sector driven into the ground. Since the Chancellor's spring statement, I've received almost daily messages from businesses right across my constituency who are seriously concerned about their future. This is existential. Just this week, a small salon owner who's been in business for over 27 years got in touch with me and said that this is the most challenging period she's ever experienced. The government's changes to employer national insurance contributions and the national minimum wage will see labour costs for average small salon in my Gosport constituency rise by over £25,000. This is completely unsustainable, and as my honourable friend says, it just forces people into the black economy or out of business altogether. Only very recently, the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions set out her government's welfare reforms, arguing that these are aimed at incentivising people who are currently in receipt of benefits back into work to secure employment. But I'd love to hear from the Minister how he sees that tallies with the closure of small businesses in our communities and the redundancy that will result from that. And on top of this, the government's actions are set to make 1,000 apprenticeships across the country unaffordable, closing the door to young talent, diminishing training and employment opportunities. I've heard from one local barber who's trained apprentices for years, and he's now said that the government's changes mean he won't be able to afford to train another apprentice. So businesses will suffer. Female-led businesses in particular will suffer, and female work opportunities. Communities will suffer, and in the end, the government will see declining tax receipts. So will the Minister, first of all, admit that his party made a mistake, set out how he attempts to communicate with the Treasury to try and U-turn on this? I don't think anybody on this side of the House would blame him if his party took that very sensible step. And also on Monday, I'll be hosting a roundtable for all the hair and beauty salons across my constituency. I'd love to know what his message is to them.
Shannon.
Again, a pleasure to serve under your chairship, and again, can I commend the Honourable Lady for Hornchurch and Upminster for bringing the debate, and thank her for that. You look at me, Madam Chair, and you'll say that guy, the beauty person would be working all day and wouldn't make much difference, you know. There's nothing up here on the top of my head, so when it comes to going to the barbers, well, it doesn't take me too long, you know, but there you are. But I say that in jest because I want to introduce it. Why am I bringing this forward? I'm bringing it forward on behalf of my constituents, and the ones who have contacted me. Honourable Lady referred to it, others referred to it. We're inundated with those who come to me, so the many local businesses in my area and the consumers that they provide the services to. According to the National Hair and Beauty Federation, most recently there are more than some 61,000 hair and beauty businesses operating in the United Kingdom in 2023. The hair and beauty industry is largely represented by small business, and it's all those small businesses, those mostly female owners and female operators and female workers, but not all. The hair and beauty industry is largely representative of the small business. 3/4 of business employ fewer than 5 people, while 95% employ fewer than 10. 60.5% of people working in the beauty and hairdressing industry are self-employed. Again, it's a specific group of people in relation to, and there's a downward trend where the industry has declined by some 7%. Apprentices have also declined. Honourable Lady referred to that, and some are not taking apprentices on, so those are the issues. The personal care and beauty industry as a whole grew its contribution to the EU economy by 11% in 2023, so there has been an upward trend in the business and what they do, worth some £5.8 billion, and it also makes a considerable chunk of the sector's overall contribution. I want to mention this, and this is what the people tell me. It should be noted that the large majority of hair and beauty business turnover is less than 100,000. In September 2024 industry survey, The NHBF found that 46% of salons and barbers surveyed made a profit, 41% made none, they broke even, and the rest of them just weren't doing. So those are not healthy statistics. The Honourable Lady was absolutely spot on when she outlined that business owners are facing a perfect storm of rising costs, including the withdrawal of business rates relief, increase to employer national insurance contribution and higher minimum wages. Whilst people are happier to spend money having their hard-earned self-care, profitability is not something which is there, and subsequently we face difficulty with this business sector, and there must be more support, I believe. I look forward to the Minister and what he will say in return, but it's really, really important that we get it right. The National Insurance wage, along with good supply price increases, the NIC, we're leaving these people with profit margins of a mere, according to the people, 2 to 3%. That just is unsustainable. So I conclude with this, we're mindful, Madam Chair, of the time you give us. We need to correct this and offer support to small and micro businesses in this area. So I look to the Minister to see how we can help keep our beauty and hair businesses thriving, people in employment and people looking good about themselves. This can only be done with greater support than is available right now. I know my wife goes to the hairdressers. She comes out and she feels like $1 million. I would say to her, of course, she always looks like $1 million, but that's just me, you know.
Sweet talking devil. Sarah Bull.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to my honourable friend, the member for Hornchurch and Upminster, for securing this most important debate. Now, when thinking about this debate, I looked up some quotes on hair, and my favourite was, "Invest in your hair, it's the crown you never take off." And it is a very true sentiment, although I do apologise to the men amongst us who are perhaps lacking in the hirsute department. Naming no names, you are kings in your own right. But hair is such an integral part of our being and our confidence, and we can appreciate how traumatic it is when those lose their hair when they're undergoing cancer treatment or when they suffer from alopecia. But we often just expect that we can walk into our high streets and find a hair and beauty salon who can help to tame our locks or restore our nails. But we really cannot take this sector for granted. It is a sector which, according to the British Beauty Council and Oxford Economics, contributed £8.541 billion to the UK economy in 2023. A sector which supports the direct employment of over 224,000 people. Now, I have many excellent hair and beauty salons in South Northamptonshire, but it really pained me when both Defern Beauty in Brackley and the Beauty Works in Towcester met with me and explained how desperate the position is for the industry. And it is really heartbreaking to see them explain how their lifelong work is being eroded by this Chancellor. After NICs increases, business rate relief changes, they desperately need help. Now, one of their asks is for a review of the VAT position, which will in turn help not only to save businesses, raise revenue for the Exchequer, but also save apprenticeships. The British Hair Consortium, its February 2025 report explains that, and it has been mentioned, that as VAT is applied evenly across goods and services, it has a disproportionate burden on labour-intensive industries like hairdressing and beauty, where 60% of the costs are wages. Unable to reclaim the VAT on their primary cost, which is people, there is now a distorted market and competition between VAT-registered and non-registered businesses, incentivising VAT avoidance tactics such as bunching, disaggregation and disguised employment. We should not be surprised with the rise in cash-only salons and should think carefully about what that means in practice. They also are calling to have a mandatory register of all hairdressing professionals, because without a register, VAT avoidance and disguised employment will continue unchecked, costing the Treasury billions, whilst putting responsible businesses at a disadvantage. My businesses also pride themselves on taking apprentices and bringing the next generation along. But my fear is, as the British Hair Consortium also believes, apprenticeship starts are set to reach zero by 2027, which contravenes the government's objective to reduce inactivity amongst 18 to 21-year-olds. These businesses simply cannot afford to take on the next generation, and this is stifling the industry in the long term. I implore the government to engage with this industry and take immediate action. Hair is a beautiful form of self-expression. Where will we be left without it? Thank you.
So keep Barty.
Thank you, Ms McVeigh. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And actually, can I first start by thanking my honourable friend for Hornchurch and Upminster, not just for securing the debate, but also making the very eloquent arguments around the hair and salon and the hair and beauty industry, but also the broader impact of the Chancellor's damaging budget last year. For example, the impact on nurseries and the knock-on effects. Because what we do know about this industry, and has already been said in this debate, is that it's a disproportionate employer. Those almost 250,000 people are employed in this industry, a disproportionate employer of women and of young people. So in the limited time that I've got, I'm going to limit my comments actually, because I think a lot of it was already said by my honourable friend and other honourable friends around this. But I had the pleasure of visiting Aesthetics Hair in Solihull, Sarah Brown, the award-winning Aesthetics Hair, and she very eloquently put down to me a lot of the arguments that were put forward to me. Now, of course, these are industries, these are businesses that may never have actually contacted their MP before because they've never felt the need to do so. Like many small businesses, they've just got on with the job in front of them. And I'm sure the Minister recognises this, but the very first message I would share with him, because I'm not sure that his colleagues in the Treasury do, that small businesses are not there to be squeezed till the pips squeak. And I think there is a real concern with the rise in NI, the reduction in the threshold, the impact that it will have on part-time workers, the reduction in rates relief, the impending employment rights bill, and of course the highly competitive market that this industry now operates in. This could have huge impacts. And we've already heard about the impact on hiring of apprentices. Of course, when there are disincentives on business, such as higher taxation or a much more competitive business environment or higher regulation, the inevitability is that the businesses will then have to look at where they can cut costs. And of course, those young people who come into apprentice positions, who have lesser training, who are yet to learn the skills of the trade, so to speak, are the easiest ones to cut, because of course those businesses have to continue to operate. And I'm sure the Minister, and I make no comments about his hairstyle or anything like that, but I'm sure the Minister will acknowledge, though, that these are skilled people who do skilled work, and you can't just train an apprentice overnight. It takes time to do so. So it was certainly eye-opening to me to hear from my constituent, to understand the impact that this is having on their businesses. And the fundamental point is that other businesses in that competitive environment are being forced into an environment where they are, hairdressers are going to self-employment status, and it means that they are now being below the VAT threshold, which means, of course, lesser returns for the Exchequer. So that can't be what the Chancellor of the Exchequer intended when she stood up. I have some thoughts on what she was trying to do, which was basically trying to tax everybody to appease some of the trade unions, but we won't get into all that right now. But the reality is that the small businesses are the ones that are suffering, and there's a huge impact. And actually, I also share the concern of the impact on high streets and the extended impact that will have in terms of tax avoidance and tax evasion, which of course we're very, very worried about.
Now come to the front bench, the Lib Dem opposition spokesperson, Sarah Gibson.
Thank you very much, and it is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, Mrs McVie. And I thank the Honourable Member for Hornchurch and Upminster for securing this debate. The member for Hornchurch and Upminster made a really important point about the fact that small businesses in the hair sector have endured a perfect storm. The pandemic, soaring energy bills, red tape and unfair tax bills. Everyone here today has called for the government to recognise that this industry's importance to our economy, its importance to our high streets and the communities that we represent. And with that in mind, I would like to pick up on 3 points made by my colleagues today. That of the employer national insurance contributions, forced self-employment and apprenticeships. I think the member for Strangfield and the member for South Nottinghamshire pointed out that the hike in NICs has meant that many small businesses in this industry that are just breaking even and never mind making a profit. And this is why the Liberal Democrats oppose the government's increase to national insurance, and we believe that this is an unfair tax on jobs. The government will reiterate that the employment allowance helps the smallest businesses, but the British Hair Consortium estimates that changes could add to over £40,000 to the payroll costs of a typical business of this type. A salon in Royal Wootton Bassett in my constituency told me this week that they have seen a trend across their sector in the encouragement to become self-employed, as has been mentioned by many of our colleagues today. Employed and rent a chair, as she called it. This didn't come as any surprise to me, and neither will it to other members. The increasing costs associated with employing staff, coupled with the complex and fairly impenetrable employment rights bill coming down the line, means that many small businesses, such as salons, are struggling to plan ahead. These are small business owners who do their running of the business in the evenings, not while they're trying to run the salon during the day. They need clarity from the government about the bill, what it will mean for them, and they need support in order to retain some of these staff. If they don't get that support in this particular industry, we will see a huge increase of people becoming chair renters. And I hope that the Minister will address some of these issues around clarity on that bill. In addition to the challenges of retaining staff, in the current climate, it is the fact that small businesses are finding it almost impossible to afford to host apprentices. A point also raised by the member for Hornchurch and Upminster. Hair salons and beauty sector has long provided a route for young people, particularly for disadvantaged backgrounds, into meaningful careers. But that current apprenticeship levy isn't working for them. As Liberal Democrats, we would like to see a more flexible skills and training level that helps businesses invest in their teams. This Friday, I will be supporting a careers fair in Wiltshire that will connect students with lots of small local business. I hope that the Minister's response today will provide me with some reassurance that I can give to those budding apprentices about their futures. And I would just like to end by congratulating the member for Hornchurch and Upminster for securing this very important debate. Thank you.
Harriet Baldwin.
Thank you very much, Ms McVeigh. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship this afternoon. And can I add my congratulations to the member for Hornchurch and Upminster for securing this important debate and setting out the issues in terms of government policy on the hair and beauty sector so clearly, because it truly is, Ms McVeigh, SOS time. Save our salons. We have heard from across the country today, from Ribble Valley, from Bromsgrove, from Stourbridge, from Gosport, from Strangford, from South Northamptonshire, from Solihull and from Chippenham, just how important these businesses are to our constituents. They make not only a huge economic contribution, but they also make an enormous contribution to our personal well-being, to fostering community spirit and to tackling loneliness in our communities. We've heard about the over £8 billion of economic contribution, but the impact that they have on people's giving opportunity for a moment of peace in a frantic life is also something that should not be underestimated. And so it is with great regret that the government's recent decisions have put such uncertainty into this sector. We all acknowledge the sector has had a long-standing issue with VAT because it can't be reclaimed on their biggest expense, labour. But we've also heard that around 60% of their costs are wages, and that the government's decision in the Halloween budget have actually made things considerably worse for these businesses, particularly the change in the threshold to national insurance. And many of the businesses in this sector are small, they're medium-sized, and they add so much to our high streets, and they are being gravely affected by the budget. I quote the British Beauty Council. They say the assumption that these businesses can simply absorb the costs is hugely misguided. Instead, it will most likely prevent wage increases and deter people from hiring more staff, therefore stifling the very growth that the government wishes to see. And alongside this, there's additional pressure from the rise to the national minimum wage. In another blow in the Halloween budget, the Chancellor reduced the retail, hospitality and leisure relief, as we've heard, from 75% discount to a 40% discount. And this has been another major hammer blow to the sector's financial well-being. We know that the budget itself has had a big impact on the sector because the National Hair and Beauty Federation has just published a report examining the impact of the budget on the hair and beauty sector. It says that businesses in the sector are expected to incur an additional £139 million in costs, and that's before making any operational adjustments. Labour expenses alone rising by £100 million. And as a result of that, the report revealed that 72% of businesses are anticipating having to raise prices. No wonder the IMF is calling out the inflationary impact of this budget. 45% of the businesses intend to cut their staff hours, and another 45% plan to reduce their workforce. On average, each business expects to lay off 2.7 full-time equivalent employees and an apprentice. Overall, the sector's profits are expected to decrease by 15%, turnover down £20 million, corporation tax therefore down, decreasing from £240 million to £200 million, and the sector's total tax contribution is actually anticipated to fall by £44 million. A great example of the Laffer curve in reverse. Following the budget, the Hair and Barber Council polled hair professionals across the country, and of their 2,000 responses, they found that 42% are now considering closing their businesses in the next 12 months. 80% said they're now forced to consider moving to self-employment. 94% said they're either extremely concerned for the future or believe a generation of apprenticeships will be lost. And 98% do not believe this sector is valued by this government. Can the Minister confirm if they commissioned any kind of impact assessment of the potential impact of the changes to national insurance at the Halloween budget on the number of apprenticeships offered by high street businesses? We know already that the impact of the Employment Rights Bill is to add a further £5 billion across the whole of UK businesses. So what assessment has the Minister made of the potential impact of the 2024 Halloween budget on the level of employment of women in the hairdressing and beauty industries? Another long-standing concern that we heard raised in the debate was the tax avoidance and criminal activity, particularly with illegal barbershops linked to money laundering. I tabled a written question to the Home Office on this subject, and I received the following response. According to a report by the local data company and Green Street, the average number of barbershops per 10,000 people has more than doubled in the last 10 years. From 1.4 per 10,000 people to 3.1 per 10,000 people in 2023. So what assessment has the Minister made of criminal activity amongst barbershops, and what steps is the government taking to tackle it? We've heard today how important the hair and beauty sector is to our high streets and to everyone in our constituencies who uses them. This government's Halloween budget has delivered a devastating blow to the sector and put its future in jeopardy. Will the Minister commit to reversing those damaging tax increases?
Minister.
Mr McVeigh, in the usual way, let me begin by congratulating the Honourable Member for Hornchurch and Upminster for securing this debate. And let me say at the outset, as in all the debates that I am privileged to do in this chamber and in the main chamber, there are usually always points for many other government departments as well as my own, and I'm very happy to make sure that other government departments have heard the different insights, let me put it in those diplomatic terms, offered by all members in this debate. We heard, as well as from the Honourable Lady for Hornchurch and Upminster, from the Honourable Gentleman for New Forest East, from my Honourable Friend for Ribble Valley and my Honourable Friend for Stourbridge, from the Honourable Member for Honourable Lady for Bromsgrove, Honourable Gentleman for Bromsgrove, I beg your pardon, the Honourable Lady for Gosport, the Honourable Gentleman for Strangford, the Honourable Lady for South Northamptonshire, and the Honourable Gentleman for Solihull East, as well as the opposition spokesperson for who speaks for the Liberal Democrats from Chippenham, and indeed the member for West Worcestershire. Let me, at the outset, begin to respond to a couple of the points that came out in the Honourable Lady for Hornchurch and Upminster's speech. I certainly take this opportunity to commend her and indeed other honourable members for the support that she has shown and indeed others have shown to hair and beauty businesses across the UK and specifically in her constituency. And while I was researching in preparation for this debate, I noticed that she had ran a campaign to highlight the very best salons in her area so they could be nominated for the British Hairdressing Awards. I don't know whether Wind and Hair were one of those that she nominated, but I certainly wish them well in the coming months. It is, I think, very important that we continue to champion this sector as individual constituency MPs because of the significance that hair and beauty businesses have to our economy, to our high streets and to all our daily lives. Many members have asked about the extent to which government engages with the hair and beauty sector, and let me just confirm that I regularly meet with the sector to understand their views and concerns. Indeed, the very first business that I visited on my appointment was the excellent Pall Mall Barbers, which was founded by the remarkable Richard Marshall, who couldn't read or write when he started in the industry and now runs some 8 stores in central London and indeed in New York. Those conversations with the sector include, as well as visits, holding round tables with key representatives of the industry. Indeed, the next one is due next month. I think it is important because the hair and beauty sector is one of the industries that I would gently suggest has been neglected for too long over the last decade. Economically, the industry contributes some £25 billion to the UK economy and employs over 550,000 people. Hair and beauty businesses, as members have quite rightly set out, are found on every high street and in every town and village in the UK. They are essential for pulling people to the high street and help in that way to generate the footfall that keep other local businesses on the high street. And yet, it is true that the contribution of the industry is far more than an economic one. I think the Honourable Lady quite rightly drew this out in her contribution too. It is an industry that should be championed for its female entrepreneurship, for the opportunity it brings to people from all backgrounds, and its role in combating, on occasion, mental health challenges. For example, over 80% of hair and beauty workers are women, and almost 90% of businesses in the sector are owned by women. And almost half of all jobs in the sector are in areas with traditionally high levels of unemployment. And that does, I think, underline the contribution that the sector makes in getting people into work and into an exciting and creative career path. And whether it's getting a fresh haircut, a massage, or even just chatting to your beauty therapist, many people relish the conversations that their local salons offer. I'm not sure there's much a beauty therapist in Harrow West could do for me, but I certainly value the conversations and skill of Paul's barbers in North Harrow in my constituency. In short, hair and beauty businesses are a vital pillar of our high streets and communities. I do recognise that it's been an exceptionally challenging decade for high street businesses, and that includes the hair and beauty sector. The pandemic, followed by the cost of living crisis and rising interest rates, forced many hair and beauty businesses to have high levels of debt, depleted cash reserves and reduced profit margins. And honourable members opposite may not like to hear this, but the government did inherit a very challenging fiscal position. So we have had to make some very difficult decisions in relation to tax, spending and indeed welfare at the autumn budget. Some of these measures that were in the budget have concerned the industry. Those decisions, I do believe, are important for delivering long-term stability and, in time, even more significantly, economic growth. I will do in a minute. And many hair and beauty businesses will benefit from some of the other measures that the Chancellor announced. Happily to give way to the Honourable.
Thank you very much to the Honourable Gentleman. Predictable, of course, that he would try and push the blame onto the previous government for some of his government's decisions. But does he not agree with me that actually it's just such a retrograde step? I mean, as a number of members have tried to explain, that actually what he's seeing from these small businesses is a decrease in the tax take, a decrease in the employment opportunities at a time when his government have bet the house on growth. All he's seeing is a decline in growth. Surely that is a decision. That's not a position that he's been forced into, and it's a retrograde step.
Well, I would have thought that the Honourable Lady would have welcomed the measure that we took in the budget to protect the smallest businesses. We increased the employment allowance so that almost 1 million employers pay no national insurance contributions at all. More than half of employers will see no change or gain from that package. And that includes many hair and beauty businesses, as the vast majority of them are micro-sized. Happily give way to the lady.
But would the Minister not agree that at the same time he reduced the threshold at which that stepped in, such that any allowances meant that it was counterproductive to most small businesses? The increase in NICs once they paid it, and the fact that they were paying it on a £5,000 rather than £10,000 employment meant that lots of part-time workers suddenly were liable for employment contributions where they hadn't been before.
Just come back to the point I made earlier. I mean, we inherited a very difficult fiscal position, which I think, to be fair to the Liberal Democrats, they do accept. Unfortunately, the Liberal Democrats never like taking difficult decisions, in my experience. Happy to support the benefits of those difficult decisions. So we did seek to protect small businesses as much as we could in the budget in order to repair the finances of the country going forward. We are creating a fairer business rate system that protects the high street, supports investment and is fit for the 21st century. We have committed to reforming business rates from 26-27 with a permanently lower multiplier for retail, leisure and hospitality businesses, which will include hair and beauty salons. I also understand the sector is competing against unfair and illegitimate businesses, as many honourable members' contributions drew attention to. HMRC recognise that tax can be very complex, and we are working with the sector to help businesses remain within the rules. But there are those who are engaged in criminal activity, and we take that very seriously. As has been well chronicled across various media outlets, the National Crime Agency has been coordinating Operation McKean's Eyes, which saw 265 premises visited, where officers secured freezing orders over bank accounts totalling more than £1 million. Other work in that space is ongoing, and we will continue to support law enforcement partners to tackle high street crime more generally. Improved funding to help law enforcement partners go after gangs was announced in the budget too. Later this year, we'll be publishing our small business strategy, which will set out the government's vision for small businesses and will focus on boosting a range of support to businesses, both in terms of creating thriving high streets, making it easier to access finance, opening up overseas and domestic markets, building business capabilities and providing a strong business environment. All of those are vital to the growth and resilience of the hair and beauty industry, and I will certainly continue to work with the sector as the strategy develops. My honourable friend specifically asked me, my honourable friend for Ribble Valley specifically asked me about the consultation that had been announced in the that had been run by the previous government, and whether or not the government was going to respond to that. We are due to respond to that as soon as is possible. The Department for Health are leading on that issue, so I hope she will continue to watch the space in this area and campaign on it going forward. But on that note, in conclusion, I know that the hair and beauty industry is incredibly important to every high street and every community in the UK, and I will continue to champion it in the House and across government.
Julia Lopez to wind up.
I thank every colleague who's spoken so passionately on behalf of their local businesses and the local people who run those businesses. And I hope for the local business in my patch that I have given them, have done them justice for the challenges that they're facing, and I appreciate all those who supported me in preparing for this debate. I thank the honourable member for Stourbridge. I think she was courageous in admitting that national insurance has become a problem for some of her local businesses. My honourable friend for South Northamptonshire raised the importance of hair to the sense of self, and I neglected to mention a very important business in my Hornchurch constituency, Bear With The Hair, which helps women who are going through hair loss in relation to cancer treatment. These are the kinds of businesses that are being affected by these challenges. My honourable friend for Bromsgrove and the honourable member for Ribble Valley raised the very important issue of rogue operators, and my real fear is that if we drive some of these legitimate operators out of business and those salons that are regulated, we will simply see more of this kind of activity proliferate. My honourable friend from Merredin's always a strong voice on small businesses, and I appreciated his support today. And my right honourable friend for Gosport, I wish her luck with her hair and beauty roundtable. She makes the point very well that these taxes are fundamentally counterproductive, and my right honourable friend for New Forest East is always very sound on security and economic issues. He raises the very important issue of some of these businesses being fronts for international crime gangs, and it's a concern that I share very deeply. And finally, I would like to say that the honourable member for Strangford is beautiful inside and out. And I finish by saying that this is against Labour's fundamental...
The sitting stands adjourned.